An ounce of truth outweighs a pound of lies.
HB276, the Utah Public Lands Management Act. If you like your sheriff, too bad. You can't keep him. You're going to get a new cop in the forest. And it's not the Fish and Game. It's not the DWR. It's not the BLM. It's the DLM.
DLM.
Utah's own DLM, equipped with new uniforms, probably some MRAPs, some shiny badges, some new Glocks, and lots of authority to bust you down.
We hope you're going to call the governor at 801-538-1000, 801-538-1000 to get him to veto this bill. NAFTA has over 1,000 pages of regulations on American businesses.
It's a Thought Police free zone. The Liberty Lineup radio show, where independent thought just can't be bought.
I'm an American. Red, white, and blue. And I'm a citizen of this world and of heaven. Some things were meant to be together. I believe in faith and freedom. Got a country too. I believe with faith and freedom. We're gonna make it through.
Welcome to the Thursday segment of the Liberty Lineup radio show. This is the Naked Truth segment where we think right and wrong, not right and left. This is Ben McClintock with my co-hosts.
Enoch Moore, and we have another co-host in the studio we'll introduce in a moment.
So today we'll be talking about the sheriffs. The legislature gave away their authority, and we'll be flushing this out. All of the details. Give us a call.
'Cause everything's on the line. We gotta rise up. We gotta stay strong. To save our way of life. I believe in faith.
801-254-5855 for the common man and the common listener. By all means, though, sheriffs, you may call the special hotline, which Ben just mentioned.
We'd like to thank our show sponsor, formerly EOS Mobile, now Patriot Mobile, rebranded to reflect who you, our listeners, are. Patriot Mobile, the only cell phone service that gives you the peace of mind that your monthly bills are supporting only conservative candidates and causes of your choice, including this show. Call 877-367-7524. Be among the first 10 callers during the show today, and you'll get a special offer. If you mention the Liberty Lineup radio show, call now, 877-367-7524. That's 877-367-7524. For more information, go to patriotmobile.com. Just a reminder that you can listen to the Liberty Lineup online by downloading the K-Talk app on your smartphone at k-talk.com. Great reception wherever you are. Become part of our grassroots movement by signing up at libertylineup.com, where you can also make a donation to keep this radio show on the air. Help us spread liberty around the world. So again, this is Ben McClintock of defendingutah.org with my co-hosts.
We have Enoch Moore, and we have a...
Jared Green is here reporting for duty again, sir.
Jared Green.
My civic duty.
I think we got to speak a little closer to the mic there.
My civic duty, I am here.
Civic duty, okay. Jared Green. And we are thankful to have Jared Green here helping us today.
Ben, just when we thought we were safe and sound, we were saved from a con. I hear there were many mean faces up at the Capitol. They were many people were gnashing their teeth and having fits of rage when they found out a miracle happened. People killed the con this year in Utah.
They did. It was a miracle. At the it passed the House committee and floor, and then went to the Senate and was killed right there in committee. People were asking the right questions, and the committee made the right decision. It was a miracle.
Fasting and prayer works. You know what also works? People participation.
It's like our gardens. You know, the Lord, He expects us to do the work. He expects us to plant the seeds, and expects us to water the garden, but he provides the miracle of the sunshine. He provides the miracle of the rain. And the same thing with our freedoms that he gave us. He will provide the miracles when we do the work.
Yep. So freedom isn't like rain. It's not like a free lunch. You got to show up. We, the people of the United States, et cetera, et cetera. What are you doing in your neighborhood? 801-254-5855. But just so you know, before the boys and girls ended their reign of terror this year up at the Capitol, they passed HB276. HB276, the Utah Public Lands Management Act, just created a new police force. The people of Utah are getting a new police force on top of everything we have, on top of the TSA cops on the trains that the homeless people ride, on top of the Unified, on top of the... What else we got? There's...
So
the
maybe
DLM has their own police force. We've got, all these different agencies are getting more and more weaponized and becoming a terror on the people.
Yes, they are. Just ask the Finicums. So HB 276, with your tax dollars, I guess your taxes are going up because the government doesn't march on an empty stomach.
Well, here's the funny thing about that is they're actually trying to claim it's not going to cost us anything.
They're going to work for free.
It's like they say, oh, well, with the lands transfer we're doing, we're going to make so much money just from the natural resources it pays for itself, so we don't need a fiscal note for it.
Uh-huh.
That's actually what they said. Now, I think maybe the reason they don't have a fiscal note attached to this new police agency that they've created is that it's a delayed implementation, so it's a few years down the line before they actually have to do anything. So I think maybe they just figured, we don't need to put it in, and then for now we can just say, it's not costing us anything.
In 1776, the Declaration of Independence was being signed in America, and over in Europe you had the buildup of the Illuminati combination. This year at the Capitol, the con died, but we got HB 276, more cops for the state of Utah. Utah's own version of the BLM. And this is the worst part, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. HB 276 neuters the power of your sheriff.
It effectively neuters it. Now, if you read the bill...
Snip.
It's sort of... There, you can read the bill and say, this is okay because there's some wording in there that says it will not actually diminish the power of the sheriff, but you read the whole thing and it's basically just saying under certain conditions. So this new bill that has been passed into law that the governor has not yet vetoed, in fact, I'll read the lines 337 to 339 of the Utah Public Lands Management Act. Your local sheriff is neutered when it comes to protecting ranchers, or really... the way they say it is when it comes to wildlife. So they're saying the sheriff has all the power in the county, just like they've always had, except for when it's a wildlife issue. So they're saying for wildlife issue, they need some experts on wildlife to kind of deal with things, right? Well, the Bundy Ranch in Nevada, the whole standoff happened because of wildlife, because of a desert turtle. And wildlife is the excuse used in all these situations that are running ranchers off their land and running their families, multi-generational rancher families, into bankruptcy. It's always about wildlife. That is just if you're walking down the street and you might step on an ant, it's a wildlife issue, you can't walk down the street. That's the kind of logic they're using. And so they're saying as long as they can claim it's a wildlife issue, this new agency, the DLM, has sheriff, primary authority over the sheriff. And there's another part of the bill where they say the Division of Wildlife also has primary authority. Now, that is currently part of Utah code already, which ought to be repealed for the same reason why this new agency is bad. And so the Utah Sheriff's Association came out with a letter saying, we support this bill, and what they're saying about the new authority, this is the way it's always been. Nothing has changed. Well, that's only half true. That's true with respect to the Division of Wildlife. That's already in code. But that should be repealed. That's not right anyway. And because there's
this Utah version of the BLM, they're calling it the DLM. It's almost the same. They can get confused. The Department of Land Management, where an unelected bureaucrat, quote, from the bill, it says from 337 to 339, will be the primary law enforcement authority with a jurisdiction on public land. And so in your county, whatever is considered public land, and just like with the Bundys, the desert tortoise comes in, and all of a sudden we got those problems. It's they're going to be able to have this new DLM have primary authority according to the law, take over the power of the local sheriff.
Now, Ben, a couple of months ago, we were on the verge of a renaissance right here in Utah. You had ranchers that they're fed up, they're tired of it, they know the scam, they know the con, and it's not just the con. There's a lot of cons out there because our whole government's run by cons. When the ranchers were meeting down in Sanpete County, one of the representatives came rushing up to that little renaissance and tried to put the kibosh on that. I believe his name is Mike Noel from Kanab. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, and I think the meeting was in Kanab, but Lavoy Finicum was on our radio program right here on K-Talk, the Liberty Lineup, and he explained what Mike Noel did, and I'll quote Lavoy. He says, quote, Mike Noel and this group found out about this, meaning the ranchers declaring independence from the BLM, actually doing something to enforce the Constitution, and they ran out there the next week saying, no, give us more time. We will get this done. Don't do that. And so it took the steam out of it, and that could have been the first full county because they have the sheriff behind them. They could have been the first whole county in the union to throw off this federal chains. And so he was telling them that they're going to work in that in the federal arena. In the legislative arena. And so this is what Representative Noel delivered for them. So he's saying, no, don't declare independence from the BLM. And now we find out why. It's because they wanted to create this new police agency to destroy more of the authority of the sheriff.
So make this clear for our listeners. The ranchers were doing the right thing by nullifying unconstitutional federal law and declaring their rights with the backing of the county and the sheriff. They were doing the right thing. That is the right solution to this whole problem. And Mike Noel came down saying, no, don't do it yet. I've got a different solution. So they couldn't have them do that yet because they didn't have this new police agency in place. So at the time, the sheriffs didn't have this new DLM agency to deal with, but he wanted to get this through. And there's a whole bunch of other problems with this bill as well, by the way. It's the whole thing is full of regional government, Agenda 21 and all that. But besides that, just talking about this one issue, they were doing the right thing. Mike Noel came and said, no, don't do the right thing. I'm busy doing the wrong thing. You just don't know it yet. And that's ultimately, that is legislative treason. What else do we call it?
We know,
that's
like
exactly
I said.
what it is. And that the sheriffs are actually now coming out with their letter. When this article of ours that you can find at defendingutah.org went crazy viral. Everybody was talking about it, and so our legislative would-be masters started, rounding around getting everybody together to respond to this, and they've been sending out this letter from the sheriffs, the Utah Sheriffs Association, that supposedly debunks what we've said, but we're just quoting from the bill, and so I think it'd be good for us to go over some of the fine points of even the letter. The letter from the Sheriff's Association admits everything that we wrote in the article.
You're right, and I think maybe we should do that after break. We've got about 60 seconds left to break here. But, okay, so after the break, you're going to want to listen in, and anyone who is interested in this subject is going to want to listen in. After the break, we're going to talk the details about how our sheriff's authority is being threatened. We're going to talk about the letter that the Utah Sheriff's Association wrote in support of this bill, in support of the bill that takes their authority away, with the idea that, well, if they support it, maybe everyone should just chill out, right? So we're going to go over that letter, and we're going to listen to their response, and we're going to talk about that, and then maybe we'll take some calls, and maybe we'll give these sheriffs a call on the air, and why don't we ask them, say, do you really support this letter? But first we'll talk about the letter. We'll get a foundation on what we're talking about, and you're going to want to stay tuned. So
801-254-5855 when you want to be on the program. Have you talked about HB276 in your neighborhood? Again, like I said, I thought it died, but no, it passed. The new police force is coming.
This is Ben McClintock with Enoch Moore and Jared Green. This is the Liberty Lineup Naked Truth segment. We'll be right back on AM 630. Hey, we're back. This is Ben McClintock on K-Talk Radio, AM 630, k-talk.com with the Liberty Lineup Naked Truth segment where we think right and wrong, not right and left, sponsored by Patriot Mobile. People are asking us how they can join our grassroots network to get our updates and alerts. Just to go to libertylineup.com, that's libertylineup.com, and sign up. And if you like what you're hearing, you can support the cause of liberty with a donation of any amount. That's libertylineup.com. You can also like and share our Facebook page, the Liberty Lineup Radio Show. And we're talking about legislation that was passed this year, HB276, that actually does something that the bill doesn't say that it does. It says it's the Utah Land Management Act, but stuffed in there is an additional police force that removes more authority from the local sheriffs. And we're on with Enoch Moore and Jared Green. Guys, what's going on here?
By the way, Jared Green, welcome again to the show. So we have let this sink in. This is you got to let this really sink in. This is a new agency with policing authority higher than the sheriff, quote, under certain conditions, right? Which those certain conditions can be pulled anytime, right? And the specific certain conditions they talk about, meaning wildlife management, are the exact conditions that have been used by the BLM to steal the land from ranchers in states all over the West for over the past 50 years.
It might be a tortoise. It might be a snowy plover. It might be a kangaroo rat. Maybe another California mountain lion that prefers to eat bicyclists.
The new Canadian wolves that are coming down, or perhaps a scorpion or a tarantula.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned the wolves coming down. Those wolves have been planted here on purpose. So they were brought in here like as part of some endangered. Am I right, Ben? As some part of some Endangered Species Protection Act, they're like, let's take these wolves and help them not be endangered by moving them to new habitats. And then they move them into the backyard of ranchers, and they say, oh, now you can't use your land. There's an endangered species here.
Cass Sunstein out of Chicago was huge behind that back in the 90s.
Cass Sunstein. I'm not familiar with Cass Sunstein.
Cass Sunstein's a bad dude. He's been around forever, not quite as long as Henry Kissinger, but Cass Sunstein's, most things that come out of Chicago are bad news.
Yeah, that's true.
Except for our new sales rep.
So let's talk about the sheriff's response. Okay, so the sheriffs had to respond.
It's interesting. Before we get to that, I want to get people understanding. So the people that were defending liberty, people that were actually standing up against the government, people like the Bundys, they were being attacked, and you have these ranchers that were declaring independence from the BLM. Mike goes in and tells them not to. This is all a part of American Lands Council that Lavoy Finicum said, quote, the federal government loves the American Lands Council because what do? They keep it in the legislative arena. They keep it in the judicial arena, the federal judicial arena. They, the feds, like that because they'll never lose. They'll just keep stretching it out. They'll stretch it out for 30 years. So that's what Lavoy had to say about those that were behind this. And so we've got this group of people, these ranchers that just want to be free. They're saying let's take action, where you've got these politicians that are invested in the process, invested financially and with power in keeping this going on indefinitely.
And talking about them taking action, let's make it clear, they've been going the legislative route for generations.
Right.
Their great-grandfather, I don't know how, it depends on the family how far back it goes, but some of these families, their great-grandfather has been having these fights, or their grandfather was having these fights, and they literally inherit the court cases.
Right.
And the federal government always wins. Now, they're trying to get an honest redress of grievances, and there is no recognition for what the Constitution actually says in these matters in these federal courts. They are fully within their natural rights to simply say, you have no authority, this is my land. And that whole premise needs to be understood, and continually going the legislative route is going to get you more of the same, unless they decide that there's some alternative solution in the legislative route that still gives the federal government what they want, which is part of what we think is happening lately now. They might actually sort of pretend to get our lands back. But that's a whole nother show and a whole nother story. We have articles on that. So now this came out. The new policing agency, sheriffs are losing their power, and people are really upset, rightfully so. It's the most viral article we've ever done in the past 2-3 years at defendingutah.org. And people are calling their sheriffs. People are upset, and we're so pleased to see that. But the sheriffs had to respond. The sheriffs are saying, okay, we've got an issue here. This is what people are seeing. We need to respond to it. And so they came out with an official response from the Utah Sheriff's Association, and only one of the sheriffs signed it, but they listed every single sheriff on the paper. I don't know if you saw that, Jared, or not, but they listed every single sheriff, kind of making it show all the sheriffs agree with this. And maybe
Which is interesting because Sheriff Jim Tracy of Utah County says he was in Canada and didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, right. There you go. So at least one sheriff didn't know anything about this, but his name's on this letter. But only one actually signed it, and that's the sheriff in Millard County, who's the president of the association, who happened to be the one, by the way, that let the feds arrest Dave Bundy without any cause. So he's the only one who actually signed it, but they're making it appear as if, look, all the sheriffs are saying this. So what are the sheriffs saying in response to the concern that their power is being removed? They are saying that, we support this bill, and it doesn't actually remove our power, and then they quote part of the bill and say, let's see, maybe I need to pull this up.
What it does is it provides the weak-bellied sheriffs a way out. They don't have to face their constituents now because now they can legally say, it's not my problem, I wish I could help you, your cause is just, but I can't do anything, there's no bullets in my gun.
So that's true. It's giving them an easy way out so they can tell their constituents, look at what the association said, we're fine. But what they said in this letter was the bill clearly identifies that the DWR, the Division of Wildlife Resources, has primary law enforcement responsibility only for protected wildlife. Okay, so number one, they are admitting that they have authority over them in the situation of wildlife. And then they say, this is current law and has not changed by the language in the legislation. Okay, so that's true. There is something about DWR having authority in current Utah Code, Title 23. If that's the case, that should be changed. That's bad. It's overriding their authority. But the letter does not even address the fact that there's a new DLM agency, Department of Land Management in Utah, being created that also has new authority over the sheriffs. So their letter completely ignores the heart of the real problem and kind of gives you this fluffy excuse for why we think it's okay that might make sense to a casual reader who doesn't get the whole background. So we're giving you the background now. They did not address the new policing agency that has new powers that overrule the sheriff.
But this new police agency, will not be working for free. That you can be assured of. The government does not march on an empty stomach. They like to eat well. So, if you like your sheriff, too bad. You can't keep him. You're going to get a new cop in the forest. And it's not the Fish and Game. It's not the DWR. It's not the BLM. It's the DLM. Utah's own DLM, equipped with new uniforms, probably some MRAPs, some shiny badges, some new Glocks, and lots of authority to bust you down. 801-254-5855. Let us know if this brightens your day. Let us know what you're going to do about it. Is anybody having a neighborhood meeting yet? Being free is so easy. I see these people in my ward, in my street. Are you going to caucus? They don't even know what caucus is. Granted, we have been groomed to be apolitical because apolitical slaves are easy to control and easy to manipulate. And we get the letter read to us in church for those who are LDS. Go to your caucus meeting. Most of the time, people don't even know what it is, but they show up to blindly follow the order. And then they try to get caught up on 100 years' worth of history in 10 minutes. And it's difficult.
And if you're a county delegate, remember Mike Noel. And it's not just Mike Noel. Every legislator that's been involved in this lands transfer scheme, they're all on board with this. Ken Ivory is defending it. We had several commissioners that are actually defending it. Darren Bushman in Paiute County was defending this, saying it's okay, it's just for wildlife. Well, that is a problem. They're admitting it,
both Mike Noel and that Mr. Bushman. They're both saying yes over wildlife areas, which is not part of the bill. The bill says public land. They're admitting that the sheriff is no longer the primary authority in those areas.
I say replace this bill with a bill to repeal the Division of Wildlife's current authority. That's what I say. But we have a caller. Should we take a caller?
Yeah, that's what we do. 801-254-5855. Caller, go ahead.
Okay, caller, you're on the air with Ben and Enoch and Jared.
And he stepped out for a lunch break.
He's on.
Okay.
Caller, you there? All right, caller is dead in the water. We'll just disconnect. If you feel like calling back, please call back. Okay, so we want to maybe see what the sheriffs actually think. What we want to know is, do all the sheriffs agree with this letter that the Utah Sheriff's Association came out with? Clearly, Sheriff Tracy in Provo, we don't know because he wasn't even, like you said, he's in Canada. But we'd like to know. So we're going to call some. I guess we still have about 5 minutes before the break, so maybe after the break and into the next hour, we're going to find out what they think. And if you are a sheriff, you want to preempt and just call in, we just want to ask you a question, say, do you support this? Find out where you stand. And we want to protect your authority in your office and the authority of the sheriff that comes after you, because that is our last line of defense against the tyrannical government. Okay, let's try line 3 again. Line 3, you're on the air. Who are we talking to?
Hi, this is Hazel.
Hey, Hazel, welcome to the show.
Hi. I just wanted to tell your listeners about a little experience that we had in our homeschool yesterday. I heard Jared say, what are you going to do about it? And that's the whole point, right? Because if we don't raise our voice against the current trends, as we've been told in General Conference, then we're complicit and we're part of the problem. And Heavenly Father says, if you're not with me, if you're not for me, you're against me. If we're not for righteousness and raising our voice on behalf of correct principle, then we're against Heavenly Father. So what we've done is just taken the extra small steps to make this a part of our daily life. So it's not something we have to think about as hard. It's just part of what we do. And in our homeschool, we just got our class together and dialed the governor, and all together we said our message to him, so he heard all of our voices at once. And he could hear the crowd of people that are demanding that this bill be vetoed. So, my point is that we need to just make this part of our life. And people think, oh, well, maybe there'll be a time when I'm not so busy and I can get to that.
Right, yes. No, freedom is like eating. You have to do it or you will die. Freedom's it's not like rain. It just doesn't fall. Right.
It's got to be part of your habit, part of who you are. Are you going to eat Twinkies and Coke every day? Is that who you are? Or are you going to wake up and eat something healthy in the morning?
Standing for freedom.
And greens. And it's just you've got to make it part of your habits and part of who you are, so it's not so hard.
And Hazel, thank you for your call. You would think more people would naturally be involved. I mean, they're not dumb. They know these guys raise their taxes every chance they get. They know what their grandparents had no longer exists in America, no longer exists in Utah. They see the high price of gas. They got to pay everywhere they go. Everything's $20. We're turning into California.
I love, Hazel, that you said it has to be a habit. There are some very wise men I once met. They started a whole business on helping people develop habits, and they had a great video that explained habits are what make or break you. You develop a habit, that's what makes you successful or not successful. So the idea of applying that to a habit of caring about and defending liberty, just as a general rule, it's just what you do in your regular life. There's a problem. Oh, we should all get together and let our governor know this isn't okay, or let whatever, just depending on the situation. I love that you say it needs to be a habit. We eat breakfast in the morning, we brush our teeth, we defend liberty.
Yeah, and every time I try to grab onto something that I feel is really, really crucial for our day and time, liberty, or anything that Heavenly Father is telling me to do, you also have to let go of something else that you were holding on to. You can't have the Twinkies and the Coke and the green smoothie. You've got to let go of some of the old habits that just don't fit in with righteous behavior. we can't have both. You can't have Babylon.
You can't
and
embrace the Constitution
the same
and a
time.
lobbyist with the same hug.
Yeah, right. So I
Okay.
guess, just learn to let go as you learn to change your habits. So
Okay, thank you, Hazel,
thanks
for
for everything
calling.
you do, guys.
Yep, call back anytime. Thanks so much. And
Bye.
we are going to, let's just double check here. Ben McClintock, do we still have you?
I hope you can hear me.
Oh, we can still hear you. Great. Okay. We weren't sure if we lost you. We got Ben remote today. So we're coming up on a break in about a minute. Jared, you looked like you had something you were about to say.
Oh, I always have. We have so much to talk about. There's always something to say. Whether it's Canadian wolves or the kangaroo rats, this is what they put into your psyche to justify what they do. And it works because then what do people do? They go to the social media and they make fun of their politicians. They don't care if you make fun of them.
Well,
Unless
what's
they
crazy
know-
is that they're speaking this complete doublespeak. I like what Enoch compared it to before. He says they're telling you they're not beating you while they're punching you in the face. And in all of these quotes, they are saying that that they're not doing it while then admitting what exactly it is that they're doing. So it's this Orwellian language that if they accuse you of lying when you quote their own bill. And so we need to see through their lies and actually look closer.
We're going to
And
break.
if you go to our Facebook page, then we can see the response that we have, and you can share that with other people. This is Ben McClintock with our co-hosts, Enoch Moore and Jared Green, and this is the Thursday Liberty Lineup with the Naked Truth, where we think right and wrong, not right and left. For more information, go to our Facebook page, the Liberty Lineup Radio Show. Like and share. After the break, we'll be back with more, with the legislature taking away our power of the local sheriff. This is Ben McClintock with Enoch Moore. You're back on K-Talk Radio, AM 630, k-talk.com, with the Liberty Lineup Naked Truth segment, where we think right and wrong, not right and left, sponsored by Patriot Mobile. Join our grassroots network to get our updates and alerts. Just go to libertylineup.com. That's libertylineup.com, and sign up. And if you like what you're hearing, support Liberty with a donation of any amount. That's libertylineup.com. You can also like and share our Facebook page, the Liberty Lineup Radio Show. And we've been talking about this bill that passed by Mike Noel of Kanab called HB276, the Utah Public Land Management Act, where it gives the authority, takes it away from the sheriff and gives it to a new agency that they create under this thing called the Department of Land Management. So we're doing this magical bait and switch of it's no longer the Bureau of Land Management, it's now the Department of Land Management, and it's controlled by an unelected bureaucrat. We go to lines 337 to 339 of the bill. It says that it gives primary, quote, primary law enforcement authority with jurisdiction on public land to the DLM. If this bureaucrat decides to take it, but normally speaking, like right now, who has the primary authority is this wild. I'm trying to find the Division of Wildlife Resources. Normally has the primary law enforcement authority, but if this bureaucrat decides to take over, now they have primary law enforcement authority, according to this bill, that we hope you're going to call the governor at 801-538-1000, 801-538-1000 to get him to veto this bill.
Before it goes into law, it must be vetoed.
Before it goes into law. And it's this really interesting thing going on right now is that these elected officials are going around saying that we're not telling the truth about what the bill says. When I just read to you the language, any person that understands English can interpret this bill. We've got constitutional scholars on this. We've got all of these different liberty-minded people that know how to read are on this, they have nothing to gain by exposing this, are telling you what it says. But you've got these politicians that have everything to gain by fooling you and lying to you are coming together and tell you that what you're reading isn't what you're reading. And that's something that we really need to really think about and look at.
It's like if I walked up to you and started punching you in the face and said, I'm not punching you. Stop telling me I'm punching you. I'm not punching you while I'm punching you in the face.
Exactly. That's exactly what they're doing. It's bizarre that they would think that they could get away with it. And some people are falling for it, but thankfully we've got the tools that we put on our Facebook and on our website to help you look through the lies. What is, you've got other outlets have come out exposing what we're reporting and interviewing about this, because our article on this on defendingutah.org went crazy viral. And so you've got Mike Noel was interviewed by the Petroglyph. And he did the same thing. He said, I'm not punching you while punching you. He says that's got to be an error carried forward from an earlier draft by the analyst. So he's denying that they wanted to do it in the first place.
Yeah, that must be an error that it said I was punching you. By the way, I'm punching you. And what it actually says is I'm punching you.
And exactly. He says, the sheriff will be the primary officer to deal with all state and county laws, excluding wildlife issues. So right there, he admits that excluding wildlife issues. So that means with wildlife issues, that the sheriff will not be the primary law enforcement.
That's what he said in defense of the accusation of that exact same sentence.
Right, exactly. And then Darren Bushman, who's the county commissioner in Piute County, says, read the bill, read the section. It's only with regard to wildlife. So he's trying to deny it while admitting that, yes, regarding to wildlife, the bill says public land. The sheriff does not have primary authority in the county. They admit it. The sheriffs admit it.
What would you expect, Ben, in this giant police state that's growing ever?
Well, hopefully, I don't expect that the politicians will tell the truth, but I'm hoping that we can expose, an ounce of truth outweighs a pound of lies. And I hope by sharing with our listeners and on our website and our Facebook pages, that when social media on Twitter and our YouTube channel, that people can compare and contrast. The politicians are admitting this and comparing the truth. What does the bill say? What do the politicians say? Who has the most to gain? What do I have to gain by telling you this? Nothing. If I'm lying to you, I'm going to be laughed and never heard from again. And I don't make a dime off of warning you about what the bill says, but these politicians, they have money and power invested in lying to you and making you believe a lie.
Let's also briefly touch that this is not going to be just Utah. So right now, this is talking about Utah's division of this new agency, Division of Land Management. But everything else that this bill is connected to Ken Ivory's land agenda. And that entire lands agenda has companion bills in other states. And they always talk about how let's do this as a region, let's do it together. So through these compacts, the interstate compacts on public lands and other things, everything they've been doing it kind of independently in every state, and then they've been joining and doing it as a region. So this is going to affect – they're going to do the same thing in every state that's within this Western Lands Trust agenda. So we'll just keep that in mind as well. If you're not in Utah, this will come to you unless this whole Ken Ivory scheme and the lands transfer scheme is exposed for what it is.
Well, the goal is to eventually put us into a little daybreak neighborhood. Out on, somewhere nice, kind of looks like a Legoland community development with a little community garden right next to the railroad tracks. Maybe we'll grow some cabbages out by the community pond. This is what they do in China. This is Agenda 21. All of this is Agenda 21. There is no other agenda than Agenda 21. So here we are in 2016.
Agenda 21, kicking the ranchers off their land, establishing a regional government and a regional police force that overrides all local authority. And we have a caller who wants to talk about the definition of wildlife. Rob, you're on the air.
Yeah, my question is, what is the definition of wildlife, Jerry? Just like you said, you and I are wildlife.
That's right, and they're taming us.
Exactly.
Especially according to the Communist Manifesto, that's they want us to be, we're beasts. Humans are beasts, just like everyone else.
But some animals are more equal than others.
What number of bill is this?
HB
276.
HB
HB 276, and I hope everybody will call the governor and ask him to veto HB 276, taking away power from the sheriff, creating a new police agency, 801-538-1000. 801-538-1000.
When's the deadline if this goes into law?
Veto this.
It will go into law. They usually have like about 30 or 45 days or whatever approximately after the session ends to sign every bill into law. So it's in that phase now of where the governor is looking at all the laws that have recently been passed, and he's going to sign them all. He can sign or veto them. So that's the phase it's in. And the governor would have signed this without hesitation had there not been this uproar, and now we need to make it controversial, and that's what's happened just by exposing it. So maybe we got 30 days. I guess he could sign it any day. Is that right, Ben? Technically, he could sign it.
From what I understand, he's got till June. I could be wrong on the exact date. But
that's longer.
Okay. Yeah, he can sign it any time between now and the last day that he's allowed to.
I mean, wildlife falls it's such a vast description. Could be grass, could be sagebrush.
Yep.
Exactly. Organisms in the dirt.
Exactly. You walk down your street, you might step on a spider. You cannot walk down the street anymore, right?
It's getting out of hand. I think there's I got to be honest with you guys. I mean, there's a lot of problems going on in this country, and I think the next legislative session needs to be put on hold. I think it needs to be frozen until a lot of these problems in this country are resolved.
Nope, no argument here. That'd be great.
Right. Have them stop making laws? Well, that could only be a good thing, I guess.
We have so many laws, and has any laws been taken off the books during this legislative session?
We should have a year of no new laws and then mixed with a bunch of repeals and nullifications.
Yeah, that's the only law that if our legislature is doing their constitutionally oath duty of upholding the Constitution, all they would be doing is nullifying laws. Like, because I think we have all the laws we need that cover the basics of protecting our liberties. So what are they doing? They should be protecting us from federal overreach by nullifying all these laws. And maybe there'd be a few good laws that continually come up, and that'd be okay. A minimal amount would make sense. But we don't need 400 new laws every year. I've been saying that.
How did we get here without those laws in the past?
Yeah, exactly. Right. How did we get here? We really need these new laws? Right. That's a very good point. So,
all right, well, take care. I'm going to make a phone call to the governor and speak my mind, I guess, because, I just see all these new laws that keep coming on the books. They can't govern the laws they've got. The federal government can't manage themselves. I mean, you watch all the stuff on. Just watch C-SPAN alone. You could watch all these hearings going down the road every day, and it's just nothing but problems. How do we learn from these problems? That's their excuse. How do we learn so we don't do this again? And
yep. Okay, thanks, Rob, for calling in. We appreciate it. Call back anytime. All right.
Thank you.
And we have another caller on line 5, Diane. Diane, you're on the air, and you wanted to talk about the governor?
No, the government.
Oh, the government. Okay.
I was just going to say that they're passing laws because they're worried about people becoming radicalized and they're worried about terrorists. I believe that the biggest entity that is radicalizing people is the government, passing all these laws, taking away freedoms, encroaching on our rights. They're radicalizing citizens.
They're creating the problem. They're creating the environment for the problem.
Well, they're making people angry. They're making people push back. People are starting to wake up and starting to realize our dire situation.
I guess there's definitely two types of people, Diane. Those that push back and then those that follow like sheep. Certainly there are more sheep because we don't push back very much. We go through the molestations at the airport. We continue to take good driver's license pictures. We continue to bend over and give them more money and we beg our rights every day in this country. We beg for our rights.
I'll tell you why I think that is. Kids are in school. They're not taught how to think. They're just taught to obey, to listen, to regurgitate, number one. Number two, they're afraid because people are used as examples, like Lavoy Finicum. He actually did push back a little bit, but he pushed back maybe a little too hard for them, and they killed him.
Yes, they did.
He had his hands up. He was surrendering, and they killed him. They shot him in the back.
You know what could have helped him? The sheriff doing his duty. That's what happened in Nevada. A deputy sheriff came and helped the situation and did his duty and stood up for the Constitution. So had there been a sheriff that stood up and said, not in my county, Lavoy would not be dead today. And that is why this is so important, the authority of the sheriff.
Absolutely. Look at what Richard Mack did. You know, it's not that hard if people will actually get the courage to do it.
Well, we're going to a hard break here. I apologize. The computer just shuts us off when we have to go to a break. So if you want to hold off after the break, finish the thought, you can, and we'll be right back.
Thanks to our sponsor, Patriot Mobile, where your monthly bill goes to support this show and only conservative candidates and causes of your choice. Go to patriotmobile.com for more information and mention the Liberty Lineup Radio Show.
I believe in faith and freedom. Got a country too. I believe with faith and freedom. We're gonna make it through.
I sent myself a...
Welcome back to the second hour of the Thursday segment of the Liberty Lineup, The Naked Truth, where we think right and wrong, not right and left, with Ben McClintock, Enoch Moore, and Jared Green. Today we'll be talking about all of the topics that are hot in Utah, in the legislature, and the culture, and everything that's going on. We want to expose the truth. No matter what it is, it's all we have is the truth. And the truth will set us free.
Gotta stay strong, 'cause everything's on the line. We gotta rise up, we gotta stay strong, to save our way of life. I believe in faith and freedom.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Weaving spiders, come not here. I guess the Utah Republican Party up at the Capitol hasn't been invited to the Bohemian Grove yet, because not all of them, not all of their
some
weaves.
of them might have been.
Yeah, well, you know, we could ask them. I mean, they're free to call us at 801-254-5855, or if you've snuck into the Bohemian Grove. It's a freak show. Growing up in California, there's a lot of freak shows out there, but just an hour out of San Francisco, where truly the great men of the world meet together for a couple weeks in July, and Nixon said it was the gayest place on earth, among other things, but he had to go.
He said it in a little bit more salty way.
Well, yes, he did, but you know, I don't say those words. Now, Nixon was a crook, even though he was not a crook, but he had to go, and the Gipper had to go, and Newt Gingrich says Donald, I guess, hasn't been, so that's why everybody's against him. It's not of what he's saying, it's because he hasn't been through the ritual and the barbecue.
So those are some of the topics that we want to be able to talk about, because we need to expose everything. But I want to make sure that we thank our sponsor, EOS Mobile, now Patriot Mobile, rebranded to reflect who you, our listeners, are. Patriot Mobile, the only cell phone service that gives you the peace of mind that your monthly bills are supporting only conservative candidates and causes of your choice, including this show. Call 877-367-7524. Be among the first 10 callers during the show today, and you'll get a special offer if you mention the Liberty Lineup Radio Show. Call now, 877-367-7524. That's 877-367-7524. For more information, go to patriotmobile.com.
Hey, Ben, did you say the truth will set us free? Because maybe we just need to change the message and the marketing here a little bit, and we'll get the left on our side. If we just say the truth will give you free stuff.
That's right. Isn't that what that we're supposed to be? We're supposed to be coveting other people's things and having it stolen for us.
So what is the truth? What is the truth today?
A bad man once asked that question. Ben, I got to jump to this story real quick. A senior Mexican official is now proposing to legalize poppy cultivation for medicinal purposes. The drug war in Mexico almost completely made possible, or if not completely made possible, by the United States. It's killing 1,000 people a month. NAFTA put 1 million Mexican farmers out of work, so they either start growing dope for the cartels or they come up here to hang drywall, work in a meat plant. But they want to legalize opium production in certain Mexican states for medicinal purposes. What is it? What do you think about that? Will this happen? Will the CIA let it happen? Will it matter? If they keep the taxes high enough, there'll always be a black market.
Right. Well, this is one of those things that the different aspects of it. You've got the oils in some areas. I know Colorado, the oils, when they legalized marijuana, the oils were made illegal. But the most effective part of it was made illegal. And so, you look at that kind of stuff of what exactly are the parts that are going to destroy the culture and what parts can actually do help. Because there's two aspects of it. I think we got the opposite sides of the coin. We got one side that wants to legalize it completely, and then we've got one side, that says it does no harm, and we've got another side that says that it's the worst thing since Satan himself. And where we know that evil people are using it to be able to destroy the culture. But we know that those same evil people are stopping it from being able to be used to help people. And we're about limited government, so it's this thing is being able to balance everything out without destroying people's liberty.
Well, I don't see this band of gangsters getting rid of the drug war anytime soon. Again, back to the guy that said
too much money and give them too much power.
The drug war keeps the prisons full. It allows for billions to be spent on unconstitutional bureaucracies. It allows the cops to pull you over. It allows them to kick your door down and say, we're sorry when we found the wrong house in Midvale. I remember that story a couple years ago. This poor guy in Midvale probably would have been killed had he picked up a shotgun to confront just out of nowhere, no knock, just bang into the house. And then the Salt Lake County Sheriff realized, oh, we got the wrong house. Sorry, senor. See you tomorrow. Sorry about the door. If he'd have had a gun, they'd have killed him. And that's the police state we live in. In Afghanistan, NATO protects the poppy fields. The borders with Mexico over here are left open. I don't know what our National Guard does in the United States of America. I guess they fill sandbags and they hand out bottled water in Flint, Michigan. But they certainly don't do their job. They're not allowed to do their job. My guess is that regardless of what Mexico does to legalize some opium crops, the border's going to remain open. We're going to continue to give arms to the cartels. We want that border open. It overwhelms the system.
Well, and that's exactly we've written about in one of our articles about how the Governor Herbert worked with Hillary Clinton to bring in all of the Chinese provincial governors to meet with the governors of the 50 states, and working with them to set up these one of the Idaho newspapers called beachheads, and so they need that open border part of the North American Union. The Chinese own the port that is the beginning of the Canamex corridor that goes through from Mexico, and that Chinese-owned port through Arizona, through over the Hoover Dam in the area that the Harry Reid's working to take away ranchers' land to set up these Chinese companies to have their beachheads there, up through Utah, I-15. All the construction you see there is a part of building the Canamex corridor. If you're not aware what the Canamex corridor was, probably a few years ago you might have heard about the NAFTA superhighway. That's our version of the NAFTA superhighway. They've got to keep the borders wide open to merge these countries together like they're doing in Europe.
Just like the regional government scheme we're seeing with the lands transfer, there's these international regional, it's the same pattern they're using. And so this Canamex corridor, this is like part of the country that in their mind will follow the United States when it is no longer the United States. They'll have this new country that comprises United States, Mexico, and Canada. And so they're building the roads with the full expectation that vision will be realized.
Well, that's exactly what they're doing. It's like a chess game. They've got to set up the pieces with the people not knowing what's going on and not standing up against it. And so it's essential that we're not, and I've said this before, we're not the most informed person in the concentration camp. It will do us no good to say, I told you so. We've got to become informed, and we've got to stand up for liberty right now.
So we have a caller who wants to talk about the drug war. How do we get that on here? Joe, you're on the air with the Liberty lineup.
Yes, I know Ben. He's a good man, does a lot of good work. About the drug war, how useless is it? I think it's just making a lot of money for those that are on the defensive part of it and the offensive part of it, too. In other words, we need thousands of dollars from taxpayers to fight the drug war, but then we have, like, troops in Afghanistan guarding poppy and pot fields, and then we have like different ones like Castro, who's members of the DGI, which is kind of like the equivalent of their intelligence. Said in a courtroom in 1983 that they heard Castro himself say, "Well, we must flood the United States with drugs, for that will add to the decay and decomposition of that capitalist society," end of quote. Comments?
You can see what it's done to California. You can see what it's done everywhere.
Well, that has been a pattern of softening a country. That's a communist pattern, right? Throughout the last 100 years, when communists moved into a country, if you study history, and you'll see in some of the details, they have a lot of different techniques of softening a country for before they move in politically and take it over. So what you just said speaks exactly to that.
And then you have the assets forfeiture seizure laws that are being abused and pretty much do away with the property rights of people, where they can go in and confiscate bank accounts, cars, and property. And there's an interesting documentary I would recommend. It's called the Prison Industrial Complex. It's the war on drugs, the Prison Industrial Complex. Check out that documentary. You can find it on YouTube.
All right. Thanks, Joe, for calling in, and maybe we'll check that out and see what's there. Call back anytime, okay?
All right. Thank you.
Yep. And we have Randy on line 5 wanted to say something about the Canamex corridor. Ben, maybe this will be interesting to see what he's got to say. Randy, you're on the air with the Liberty lineup.
Yeah, just that last caller mentioned about the softening up with drugs. That's what the opiate wars were. The City of London British Empire went into China and did that to them. And the same people that run the drugs then are doing it now. But that's another story. The Canamex, I wanted to mention that we have a presidential candidate that fits well into three cultures. Mexican, Canadian, and the United States.
Yeah, that is quite an interesting thing to look at. I know what you're talking about.
So, and one other thing here, you were talking about the Bohemian Grove. We had one president of the Mormon Church that attended the Bohemian Grove. It was the last thing he ever did. Wilford Woodruff.
Ben, you looked into that.
That's actually something that we've studied on, and he didn't actually go to the Grove. He was invited on his 80th birthday, or it was 80 years old at the time, to go to the Bohemian Club there in San Francisco proper. Yeah. And he actually had been sick before, and he had been on his trip to San Francisco. He had just previously had surgery on, it says, his bowels or his stomach. And so he was deathly ill before he went there. Now, I'm not saying that they wouldn't do anything nefarious and or anything like that. I mean, of course that they would, but there's a lot of open-ended things about that whole situation.
Thanks for calling. We got to go to a break now.
This has been McClintock and Enoch Moore and Jared Green. We're back on K-Talk Radio, AM 630, k-talk.com, with the Liberty Lineup Naked Truth segment, where we think right and wrong, not right and left. sponsored by Patriot Mobile, the cell phone service for conservatives. And we've been talking about a lot of different things. The first hour we talked about the governor needing to veto HB 276, the bill that would that's creating another police agency called the DLM. And the number to call if you want him, we need to have him veto that bill, is 801-538-1000, 801-538-1000, 801-538-1000, veto HB 276, HB 276. So, and we've been talking about the NAFTA superhighway, the plans to merge the three countries together as a part of a stepping stone towards a world government. They're doing it in the European Union, and this is something that's not new. Former governor of New York, former vice president of the United States under Gerald Ford, his name was Nelson Rockefeller. He wrote a book called The Future of Federalism. This book was his plan. You know, here's the steps back in the 1960s of how to build the world government and see if these things are going through. It says, the road towards the unity of nations lays through regional confederations in the Western Hemisphere and in the Atlantic community, perhaps eventually in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Such work towards regional unities is in fact steadily progressing. The common market in Europe is an astounding example. Okay, so there he was giving the example of what they're doing in Europe, the European Union, as the example that we need to work on.
And going into the thought, immigration on this thought, the real reason why, ultimately, the overall reason, there's multiple reasons, here and there, but the overall reason that there's immigration issues everywhere in the world, parts of Europe, and there's probably in other countries that we've never looked into. I don't know the politics everywhere, but this is about erasing borders so that they build these new regional nations. And so, there are other side agendas that can go along here and there, but ultimately that's what it is. They will never build a wall, for those of you who want a wall, and there are some pros and cons to that. Walls can keep you in too. But just for example, George Bush promised a wall.
East and West Germany had a wall too.
Yeah, the walls. So I'm an advocate of a wall, but I know some people are because they think that solves our immigration problem, and it's not even an issue I need to think about too much. I just know they're never going to build one because in their mind,
it's a non-issue.
It's a non-issue. They're already acting as if we are one nation in those types of policies. That Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. are the same country. And we have a comment caller. Let's see, caller Max. You are on the air with the Liberty lineup.
Hi, I was just listening to what you're saying about roads in Europe. China is really pushing hard and has actually started construction on the Silk Road, which will link China and, of course, all of Europe. There's also the sanctions were just lifted against Iran, and they announced they're building a huge airport, a center for big wide-body airplanes to land. Now they have a hard time selling their oil there, so they'll be able to land planes there and fuel them cheaply. And they'll be the hub between the West and East. Not to mention they're buying a whole bunch. They got a huge order of, not Boeing, but the other aircraft from Europe, which will pretty much make sure that the Europe uses their airlines. Boeing is pretty much being cut out. They don't like the United States.
So you're saying it's a good thing or a bad thing that Iran does that?
This is neither good nor bad. This is going to be a huge economic boon to their country, and they're going to enter into, get out of the third world status where they virtually have nothing, and everybody's going to be selling goods to them because they got a huge population. This is going to be a boom for Europe, huge, and it's going to be an economic hub for the entire area, which will make them the new Mecca, quite literally. So, having said that, I called about the border. Now, for every reason, there is a cause. Example, for every war, it's usually based upon economics. They have something, we want it, we're going to go get it, right?
Yeah.
Now, with the border, there's a reason it's been open for 40 years. They make big talk about closing it, building walls and stuff, but they haven't. Where is that economic advantage? Think about it. Who benefits?
Well, wealth is never created or destroyed. It just changes hands. NAFTA has made a lot of people rich, but at the expense of most people getting poorer. It put 1 million Mexican farmers out of work, so they started, like I said before, they started working for the drug cartels because there's nothing else to do in the neighborhood, or they come up here and take construction jobs away from Americans.
Okay.
Well, and it's not even about free trade because, as we know, a free trade would be, hey, these two countries are now allowed to trade freely. But NAFTA has over 1,000 pages of regulations on American businesses, and you've got the in Chapter 11, if I remember correctly, of the NAFTA agreement. It actually creates a tribunal that has more authority than our Supreme Court. Oh, it can override the Supreme Court, and so it's not even really free trade.
We were told at my work that if they wanted to, they could bring in a workforce from another country and replace us and pay them smaller wages, but it'd kill them politically. But they can't do this under NAFTA. But it's more insidious than this. There's some people who benefit directly. For example, you guys were using the excuse of the drug war. Now, there's like 60,000 people have died near the border over a $3 billion drug war, gangs against gangs. Consider the people coming across the border. Now, these are not legal aliens. These are illegal. They have no status here in the country. In fact, they're felons by law, but they're working here illegally. The monies they pay into the Federal Reserve, income tax, like you and me, that's why they have to pay it. This is to keep the ice off their back. Goes into the Federal Reserve. They are identified, and that money is withheld from the general fund because these are foreign nationals. They have no business paying taxes in this country. I was told this by a man who used to work for this. Well, he was on the board of the Federal Reserve. I was asking him, what we were talking about at the time was,
who is that?
Why did they? I don't remember his name. He was retired at the time. He was getting cancer treatments with my father at the time I met him. But at the time they were having ICE go in and get those people. I think it was in Minnesota. No, anyway, the meat packers. Remember the hundreds of them were rounded up and sent back to Mexico, and they fined the meat packers millions of dollars.
Right, I remember that.
The reason they sent them in is because they were paying them under the table. They were not paying their protection tax, regular taxes like you and I. The reason that's important is that anybody who's not a member of this country, either with a green card or a citizen, their monies they pay in does not go into the general fund. It goes to like the little checkbox at the top of the IRS form where it says, "Do you wish to donate to this party? $1." The entire fund, minus a handling fee, goes to the parties. And we're not talking a few million. We're talking somewhere between $200 and $300 billion just on 40 million illegal aliens going into the Federal Reserve but not coming out. Now, contrast that with just a $3 billion drug war. What would you do for a $300 billion payout that is off the books?
Wow.
Guess we understand that.
Now you know why the states. There are certain states that are considered sanctuary states. They've got double books as well because these illegal aliens, when they pay money to the state, they get to keep that money. So they want as many of those illegal aliens in their state as possible as a slush fund.
All hidden in the Federal Reserve. Well, DZ 117 comes to mind. Overthrow the money changers.
That's why the states without a state tax are not sanctuary states.
Something to think about. 801-254-5855.
Thanks for calling,
Let us
Max.
know what you think.
Thank you.
On NAFTA, people don't realize, people think that if you're against NAFTA, you're against free trade. But it's, like I mentioned earlier, it creates a tribunal that overrides it. Even the Supreme Court of California, one of their chief justices, Ronald George, said, it's rather shocking that the highest courts of the state and federal governments could have their judgments circumvented by these tribunals. So this isn't some wild conspiracy theory. These are the leading minds of courts that are admitting that that's what these things are all about. And even Henry Kissinger said that NAFTA represents the most creative step towards a new world order taken by any group of countries since the end of the Cold War.
This is amazing. This is a pattern. I kind of talked about this before. This NAFTA pattern is a pattern we see at the international level, at the country, state level, and at the micro level. So consider this pattern, the listeners. So how do you remove the sovereignty of a nation? And what they do is they create first it might be an unofficial agreement, and then they slowly give this agreement more power, and then all the deals and talks and anything that happens in the context of these agreements start to look and behave more like a new government. And so then when you think, oh, our country signed on to that agreement, okay, we're going to follow this agreement, you're slowly eroding and moving power from your country to this agreement that sits above you in some sort of regional manner. So we see it internationally with the European Union and NAFTA, like we just talked about. You see it regionally. That's what Ken Ivory's land transfer is all about. These regional state agreements that are creating bureaucracies and rules that start to tie individual states.
And police to enforce it,
and
a.k.a.
police
DLM.
to enforce it, and even down to the county and city level. You have cities get together and they join the Utah League of Cities and Towns or the Utah Association of Counties. And when you're at the smaller level, it's hard, it doesn't always look so nefarious, but it's the same pattern. We see a regional government of individual governments that are then tied by higher rules. Now, we've had county commissioners here in Utah argue to us, well, we need to join with other counties because that's how we have more influence and power protecting you from the federal government, right? And so there's a lot of excuses and reasons as to why they need to do this. And ultimately it's the same pattern. And there was a lady who escaped from Austria. She grew up in Hitler's Austria, and she saw when Hitler came in, and she talked about she gave talks several years ago during the Ron Paul campaign, and she explained how they were doing this regional thing. In Austria, they took provinces there and created new governments and regionalized them. And she had all kinds of stories that was just identical to what we see in the United States today. It's amazing. So regional government is a Soviet model with unelected councils and
checkpoints.
Checkpoints. and
which the sheriffs, a lot of times they'll do these checkpoints. You'll see that they do. And this is a pattern that we see over time. I mentioned earlier what Nelson Rockefeller did in the 60s, what he wrote about, what they're doing with NAFTA. And then in 2005, the head of the Council on Foreign Relations, the American arm of the Roundtable groups, said in an article that he entitled, "Say Goodbye to Sovereignty." He says, sovereignty, the notion that governments are free to do what they want within their own territory, has provided the organizing principle of international relations for more than 350 years. 35 years from now, sovereignty will no longer be sanctuary. Powerful new forces, he would know, and insidious threats will converge against it. This is most clearly being done in the trade realm. And so these trade agreements, they're sold as free trade, but they're, of course, like we mentioned earlier, attacks on our sovereignty, more pages of regulation, and they're the mechanism being used to merge our countries. Karl Marx in the Communist Manifesto talked about these step-by-step approaches, which is why what we're warning about with the DLM is these are step-by-step approaches. He says that these things are done by means and measures which appear economically insufficient and untenable, but which in the course of the movement outstrip themselves. So in layman's terms, one step at a time, things that seem insignificant move us towards the greater goal. And so when we say, oh, that's no big deal, we need to have no more of that. I mean, it sounds so hard-nosed when they say you're not compromised. Well, you know what? That's what Karl Marx said is how we get communism is by these small steps that take us away from liberty. We can't accept the small steps at all. There's no more compromise on these things. Otherwise, we lose.
They use compromise against us. They get us to culturally accept compromise. Now, there's nothing wrong with compromising on issues if you're not violating principle, right? That's totally fine. And the Founding Fathers had some compromises on issues, but they never compromised principles. And I'll tell you, in my kids' school, when they come back with stuff they learn about the Founding Fathers and in government, they talk about how important compromise was to the first convention that brought our Constitution, and it's a half truth because they never compromised on principle.
Were they talking about slaves? I mean, I doubt the elementary school brings up the 3/5 compromise.
Well, the elementary school, they talk about slaves all the time. They are pounding slavery into my kids. My 5-year-old comes home and goes and starts singing these like slave songs and telling me about slaves. Like, they are pounding it into them so they don't forget.
Yep. But tax dollars at work.
We are going to a break. Ben?
This is Ben McClintock with my co-host, Enoch Moore, and Jared Green of DefendingUtah.org. This is the Thursday show, the Naked Truth, where we think right and wrong, not right and left. The Liberty Lineup on AM 630, k-talk.com. We are back with Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore and Jared Green of DefendingUtah.org on K-Talk Radio, AM 630, k-talk.com. The Liberty Lineup Naked Truth segment, where we think right and wrong, not right and left, sponsored by Patriot Mobile, the cell phone service for conservatives. And we've been just chatting about a lot of the things that are just going on and how they use these small measures, like Karl Marx talks about, to get us to accept communism, to get us to accept the tyranny. And how how we're led to believe that the Founding Fathers sacrificed principle, and when in compromise, when the truth is they never compromised their principles, they just compromised on specific issues.
If you could have multiple views of an issue without compromising the principle, then sure, compromise on the issue. But you can't compromise principles, or you lose liberty. You lose your moral ground on what you're doing.
Exactly. And that's the thing on immigration too. It's used both ways. We've talked about how immigration is used to change the culture. They're opening up the borders and whatnot, but they also use it to control a population both ways. If you can flood the gates with a culture that is anti-liberty or just different than yours, and then they can take over the culture that way. But they can also prevent the maintenance of a culture of liberty by blocking certain groups of people.
And Ben,
this is actually done.
I would add to that, or I'd clarify that actually, the flooding a culture with another culture that's anti-liberty, it's really more just a culture that's not educated in what liberty means. It's only in America that, well, not only throughout history there have been a few examples, but in our modern world, it's only in America that the concept of liberty and understanding natural law and implementing natural law into our system of government has happened, and to maintain that takes educating. So we had to educate ourselves. That's what the Federalist Papers were all about when we were teaching ourselves these concepts, and we had to maintain that by continually teaching ourselves. So bringing in another culture isn't about, look at all these crazy other cultures, let's bring them in here. It's more, let's just bring in more people who don't understand the culture of America and the culture of liberty. And I'll tell you,
too hard to assimilate all of them at once.
It'd be too hard, right? Too hard at once. But ultimately, they could all learn it, they could understand it, and they're all human beings, and liberty would resonate with any human being because it's based on natural law, and we're all children of God. And if you educated everyone on liberty, I know there are generations of from like the mid 1900s, Mexican immigrants that were very pro liberty. We've met many of them. And because they grew up learning the principles of Americanism. And when I say Americanism, I mean liberty in the Constitution. And obviously, everybody was an immigrant when we first started, and we were all taught the ways of liberty. And there's nothing that holds us back from teaching new immigrants about liberty, except for the media making you fear them. So, now, I'm not an advocate of flooding the country with immigrants and all these things they're doing, but I'll tell you, if you teach them liberty, then they become immigrants that would value our country and assets, because all human beings want freedom. And so that's my soapbox.
And it's been used against to stop the principles of liberty. Back in the 1800s, there were laws and discussions in Congress to stop the immigration of Mormons. And being here in Utah, this should be of particular interest to us. President Ulysses Grant recommended to Congress that they, quote, drive out licensed immorality and the importation of women for illegitimate purposes. They were specifically mentioning the Mormons. President James McKean, Chief Justice James McKean, presiding over the District Court of Salt Lake, said that we couldn't allow Mormons in regardless of whether they were involved in practicing polygamy or not. And then the Secretary of State, William E. Everts, back in 1879, said, under whatever specious guise subject may be presented by those engaged in instigating the European movement to swell the numbers of the law-defying Mormons of Utah, the bands of organizations which are got together in foreign lands as recruits cannot be regarded as otherwise than a deliberate and systematic attempt to bring persons to the United States with the intent of violating the laws and committing crimes expressly punishable under the statutes. And so he was using these different arguments to be able to block the immigration. There was actually laws proposed to block any Mormons from immigrating to the United States. In fact, there was a scientist, a so-called scientist, that said that he did a study and that he was able to prove scientifically that Mormons were a genetic defect and that we had to block them from coming to the United States because of this.
So you said a mouthful there, and a couple times our audio remote stream went funny. But
sorry.
But basically, this has been used in the past to make people fear populations that the government didn't like.
Exactly.
And including our own people here in Pioneer Valley.
Blocking the immigration of Mormons, and also the scientists saying that Mormons were a genetic defect and that we had to block them from being able to immigrate.
Hitler did that in World War II also. He published scientific papers on why blacks or Jews were inferior, right? That happened to Mormons, we can show, and all kinds of garbage that goes around about this is a communist tactic of divide and conquer. Make groups feel more special than other groups and not like other, and to not like other groups, and give them legitimate reasons that justifies in their conscience why it's okay to hate some other groups, and then we're divided.
So if you're an anti-vaxxer, you're clearly genetically altered before you take the drugs.
Or if you're an anti-fluoride guy.
Speaking of fluoride, Ben, I am told, now we had an interesting councilman conference call on Saturday. We got it's so easy to be free. 5 guys met at my neighbor's house, and we called our councilman, put him on speakerphone, and we asked him to talk about the fluoride in the water. We were told first there isn't any fluoride in the water, and we said, yeah, I think there is. Well, I'll look into it. So to his credit, he looked into it. And yes, there is fluoride in West Jordan's water. There's fluoride in everybody's water because the Utah Fluoride Water Board, or just the Utah Water Board, I guess makes us drink the fluoride if we want to drink the tap water.
So is it really called the Water Board, or is it called the Water Commission? I just think it's funny if it's called the Water Board.
They're waterboarding us all.
Either way, you're getting it. I guess that's an appointed position. Do you know, is that appointed by the governor?
I'd have to look into that. I don't know that specifically. But it's interesting. Like, no matter what side you are on the fluoride issue, let's say that it is perfectly healthy. It's not the poison that people are claiming that it is. It's just a vitamin to help people's teeth. If that's really what it's about, is making sure that we're healthy, why don't they put a multivitamin into the water supply?
Well, it's not healthy. I mean, I looked at I don't buy fluoride toothpaste, and I don't get cavities. But on most people's toothpaste tubes, it says do not swallow. If swallowed, contact poison control.
It is a poison, obviously. And they're saying that the water supply doesn't have those many that kind of concentrate, but over time, slowly it builds up into your system, and we can say that it's a main ingredient in Prozac. It was something that that was used in Hitler's Germany. It is something that is able to help docile people.
It seems to be working.
There's a dentist that I know that he's done the research on it, and he says that there's actually no benefits to fluoride topically. So in your toothpaste, it is a complete waste. And so it's another one of those examples of us being lied to. And if it's really about health, then why don't you put vitamin C in the water supply? Let's cut down on colds. And that's obviously not the reason. Otherwise, they'd be using it for other means as well.
So, Jared, you were talking to your city council guy. Finish the story.
Well, there's nothing he can do because West Jordan buys their water from the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. I think I'm getting most of that right. And the fluoride comes pre-packaged. It's already in the water when you make a soup on the stove.
Pre-packaged fluoride. So it's wholesale to the whole state.
I guess.
So even cities who don't want it, they've somehow gotten all the pipes together. That's what he was saying?
He said there was nothing he could do as a city councilman. So we are in bondage to the gods of fluoride. If you drink the tap water, I don't drink the tap water. I go to that well down on 5th East and 8th South. It's free water. It's great water. It's running 365. You can go and fill up your water there. Or get an RO unit or whatever. But as free people, we should get this garbage out of the water. If you want to see the gates of hell open up and combine against you, tell your government you want the fluoride out of the water supply.
Forced medication is just wrong.
Well, I believe
that. Forced medicating people is, no matter what it is, it's wrong. Even if it's, even if you think it's not healthy, it's to say that you can't get out of forcing people to soak in fluoride is just crazy. It causes fluoridosis in people. It's, like I said earlier, it's one of the main ingredients. We've got another one of our hosts, Sherlyn Eager, texted us and said that the teeth of her two youngest kids, it didn't help them at all. I don't know if it was misspelled, but the molted, or I know it causes problems with people's teeth. I know
it does. It causes cosmetic problems on the teeth. We actually have a call. We're gonna take a call and see what someone has to say. Hi, you're live on the air on the Liberty lineup. Caller, what's your name?
We're on the air?
We're on the air. Okay,
well, just to chime in on your comments about the about fluoride, be aware that I don't remember the actual date, about 20 years ago, there was a statewide referendum on fluoride, and only certain counties, those along the Wasatch Front and a few others, chose to have fluoride. And so it actually was something passed by the people of the state into law. But it's not everywhere in the state. Cache County does not, and others do not. So it was something that was passed.
What do we have to do?
So it's a state law. Does it violate the principles of the proper rule of government?
Of course it does.
Yeah.
And those of us who lobbied against it and went up to the state capitol were very handily shut down. There's a considerable agenda behind it. However, be aware that it's not something that's arbitrarily passed. It was put upon the people through a referendum.
Well, this is why we shouldn't act like a democracy. We should act on principles.
It's why we should be educated before we vote.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for calling.
Hey, Jared, we've got a text that says, where is the free water well again?
8th South, 5th East. Just Google Salt Lake Artesian Well.
Gotcha. So those are some great things that, I mean, it's just common sense that when we talk about these things, are we applying the proper role of government? Whether the stuff about fluoride being a danger is true, or if it's true that it's really good for you, is essentially irrelevant in the scheme of government, of force medicating people, putting it into the water supply, forcing us to pay for it and to take it into our water system. And so we need to apply correct principles so that we don't lose this battle.
But we're out of time for today.
Special thanks to our show sponsor, Patriot Mobile, the cell phone service that supports conservative candidates and causes. Go to patriotmobile.com for more information and mention the Liberty Lineup radio show. Stay tuned tomorrow to the Liberty Lineup for the Hollywood Y Guy. This is Ben McClintock, Enoch Moore, and Jared Green from Defending Utah. We'll see you next week, 10 to noon. Now go on and stand for truth.